Thank you, Kyle. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for coming here and taking some time out of your busy day. I just, uh, as Kai mentioned, I also had a chance to go to LastCon, which is always a special experience for me. So hope I will see more of you there. I really like also want to say, just as I also organized meetups before, is that OWASP Boston has been one of those that actually very nicely came back after um, the COVID pandemic. Many meetups organization, amazing group. So thank you. Please keep up with the good work. Just a few things about me. Even though I've been working in the security space for a little while, I don't really consider myself like a security person. So bear with me. I'm also learning some of these concepts. In the past, and as you can tell from my bio, if you ever see me talking, I'm not in sales, I'm not in marketing, I'm just an engineer. In particular at Verosint, I work here. It's a small security startup, and our really business is we are in the online occult fraud detection prevention space. I work there as in the engineering team, wearing multiple hats, but mainly I'm the testing specialist. In the past roles, I've worked with some of these identity related technologies, and now I'm working here. So when I was looking for topics to talk about, what I found, at least in my experiences, that there wasn't enough content. At least I couldn't find a whole lot around identity threat detection and response. And since we are also operating in this space, it was natural to think about, hey, well, why should we care? Why should we tell other practitioners why they should care about this particular segment of cybersecurity? In general, why do we do things? Because there are, business drivers, loss of revenue, let's say you already heard about, for example, if you have a Netflix account, you're not supposed to share it with others. That's a loss of revenue for a company like Netflix. So they probably have a technology that prevents doing that. Maybe it's a customer satisfaction issue. If your account is being taken over because your systems are not protected properly, then that can reduce customer revenue. And if you are leaking private information to outside businesses, then your brand reputation is damaged. So there are all these drivers that can force companies to go above and beyond just and get into the realm of the identity threat detection and response. And I think in many sources I look at or listen to, and I try to learn as well, they all say that identity is the new perimeter, and then some of these drivers are we are now in the cloud computing phase, and we at work, we are not just using internal systems, but we are using third-party services to do our work. So obviously we are these are also revolving around you as an employee or as a customer, how you are leveraging or using some of these services. When even just working from home alone also emphasize the need for being a little more identity centric. If you look at also some of these identity solutions in general, is that what you see is that they give you a kind of a crude way of working around identities, and it may or may not satisfy your needs. Maybe so that's why and I hope I will give you some examples and show you some examples where you will see that the more nuanced way of looking at certain behavior or certain activities, justify the need for some of these custom solutions. Just to give you a few ideas, this is one of the slides I borrowed from our marketing team. What kind of things can happen in kind of this identity-centric, world, and then these are just some of those things that revolve around the user, revolve around the identity. And I'll be showing examples of some of these as they manifest themselves. But one of the things especially when I got into identity access management space, I forget that. So what is an identity? What is everybody talking about? Okay, and this very nice image from illustration I found on Wikipedia actually really well sums up what we are talking about here mostly. I am as a person, either as a customer to a business or an employee of a company. I may have different kind of identities, and all these identities have all kinds of attributes. And I'm going to show some of these to you in action. But I also kind of sometimes some of these terms may be very nebulous and harder to grok on us. At least you have some sort of shared understanding what those are. So what does ITDR do? And again, I borrowed an image here from the NIST has a very nice cybersecurity framework, there's obviously different phases of that or segments of this framework. And, we are talking about this detect and respond areas of it. So, we are again looking at user activity and look at those patterns, and then and I'm not going to read the whole slide, but that's what ITDR is doing. And ITDR is obviously just one piece of the pie when it comes to your cybersecurity posture, but it's a more and more important piece of it. And there are all kinds of DRs in the mix, as you can see, the EDR, XDR, MDR. So it's hard to get confused, but again, ITDR is revolves around identity in general. And just to tease out one, how EDR is different from ITDR. That's for example, very well this table I try to capture how it is different, what kind of scope it has, what kind of data we are looking at, what kind of threat visibility we have, and how do we respond to incidents. Hopefully that and we could I could bring up all these things about the other solutions, but I'm not here to talk about everything else. I'm here to talk about the identity side of things. And then some of what I'm hopefully talking about is that this is also my way of thinking about ITDR in general. That may not be the only way, the comprehensive way, but I hope that what you get away with is going to give you enough so that you can go on and think about how it impacts your own context. But some of the dimensions that when I was talking or thinking about it was, what type of identities are we talking about? Obviously there are managed and unmanaged. Unmanaged can be just that you're something that your IT department doesn't know about, but you're using services for, versus the managed one, like you have a Google Apps account at work, or an Azure, or a Microsoft 365 one. And more nowadays, what we see is that, human versus non-human actors also come into play. And though you will need to have some sort of differentiation between those two. The business context is yet another dimension. You will have different kind of stories when you are mostly focusing on your customers versus when you are a big enterprise and you are serving the needs of the employees and then how they are interacting with your own or third-party systems. And different applications will have different contexts, different kind of patterns. We have also worked with companies that, believe it or not, they don't only have like a single identity provider, but multiple ones. So that also kind of sets that's the context how you need to think about what makes sense in your own little world. And of course, within even your business, you will have different kind of actors that or different types of identities that you need to work with. But one of the things I heard at a previous conference was very important is that it's very hard for some companies to deal with the employee versus contractor, what is expected from employees, what is normal, what is not normal for contractors, and so on to differentiate that. We have customers where we have these three different populations: teachers, parents, and students, and they all have their own different ways of behaving and accessing the system. So these are the kind of dimensions that come into play when you are building an ITDR solution or configuring some protection based on identities. And in the context of some of these problems or some of the things that ITDR systems can detect, we at Verosint at least talk about two different areas: threats and risks. Hopefully I can give you a few examples of those. Risks are in this sense, the way we are thinking about it, things or events, activities that the user is doing that may indicate malicious behavior. It may not. It may be completely normal. But few examples: if the user coming in and an IP address that is a Tor exit node, that may be suspicious. Or was that IP address involved in recent attacks in other areas? One of the challenges these days, especially in some companies, that somebody's using a residential proxy, which make it look like I'm in a particular geographic location, coming from an IP address range that is allocated to residential to a residential ISP. That can still be a problem. That can be detected. It's not that trivial. And then there are other indicators like it. But again, they may be in alone or isolation, may not be a big deal, maybe just a one-off problems. When we are talking about threats, then I'm going to show you a few examples of these. And then we have already identified that some activity did occur that is actually something you want to take an action on. And some of these are like account takeover, impossible travel. And hopefully I'm going to give you at least the definitions that the way I am thinking about them, how does it manifest. MFA here is multi-factor authentication. I'm sorry about some of the abbreviations. I hate them myself, but sometimes they are necessary. So in all, and we are kind of talking about in this identity-centric world, just looking at user behaviors or how we, and some examples of that. I'm trying not to talk too much about our company, but sometimes the screenshots help explain some of these concepts. So for one of these is the circadian rhythm. What time of the day is the user expected to do certain activities? So if you are an employee and you're working an enterprise application and you only have a single shift, then you probably want to have activities mostly between 9 to 5. So if you're seeing something in the middle of the night, that may be suspicious, or it's an outlier, or you suddenly see activities from a different country, different geographic location. Maybe if somebody's on vacation, maybe that's okay. But if you suddenly see some, African country, that may not be. And how many IP addresses, how many can you associate with a certain user? What is normal? What is not normal? How many events you have? Sometimes you don't even think about oh, yeah, we can detect what user agent somebody is using when accessing a web application. But is it normal for those user agents to be very old, especially nowadays that your browsers are self-updating it themselves? It turns out that some attackers use a particular user agent from like a year or so ago, and that's what they fake their activities with. Or let's say you see a stream of events with a particular user agent version, and suddenly the user agent version goes backwards. That's unusual, right? Because you usually don't downgrade your browsers and so on. So, for example, one of these, hopefully you're all familiar with this kind of threat and impossible travel, and then you have some of these events happening separate locations. Nowadays, we have very good data on IP addresses, public IP addresses, and we are talking about right now, where you can determine that, hey, those two events could not possibly happen. Of course, there are all kinds of challenges, how accurate that location is. For some address ranges, we may not have very fine granularity, or if somebody is using VPNs, or sometimes, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar that if you are like an Apple iCloud subscriber, you can in your browser, Safari browser will use some sort of relay and exit nodes versus your Chrome browser. Even though you're on the same device, it's going to show different IP address to the service that you're talking to. And believe it or not, some providers actually give you a third dimension, the altitude, in terms of determining an IP, where an IP address is. So if you're on a plane, you may get that too. So that can come into calculations. What can be causing it? Somebody breach your credentials, leak the credentials. So this is one particular threat. Another threat that is an example of credential stuffing, when you have and it's once you have a system that can real time gets these events in, then you can see this burst of activity happening, sometimes even from a single IP address or a very small set of IP addresses to a very large number of accounts. And then that's just trying out different passwords and so on. And so that's another example. Here we have actually we have seen something very big last last year and end of the year, where we have seen that this is just an example of what can happen, and this graphical charts shows that when these events were occurring. So this was like a huge credential stuffing attack that I've seen, and as you can see, so a few accounts have been taken over as the credentials they provided to the service were breached or at least cracked. Session sharing. Session sharing is actually sometimes, often when you are working with web applications, you get back tokens, and these tokens can be shared, so that if you're sharing with some other person, those don't have to go through the login. And there are actually extensions that facilitate this, which again may allow malicious actors to log into services from different places, or again abuse the service that it was not meant to. But it again can circumvent the login restrictions, and that can be also detected as so when you are using these tokens. Those are need to be refreshed every once in a while, so there is activity in your service that can be looked at, and this is how session sharing can be detected. And just a few examples of risks that are indicators. One of the things that you can look at when somebody's logging in, whether you were part of a recent breach or not. There are some databases and free online tools like Have I Been Pwned? Firefox as a monitor, Mozilla organization, and you can tell whether somebody's email was in a recent breach. That can be also negative and a positive side too. If you have an email address that you have been using for like 20 years and it has never been in a breach, that in itself could be a problem, because more likely than not, your email has been breached at least once. For domains, email domains, it's very easy to register new domains. And I'll show you some examples why domain names can be also very interesting. Activities from a recently registered domain can be riskier than from an older domain that has been around for a while, and then you have managed to collect a lot of signals. As I mentioned, residential proxies are in particular very challenging these days, especially that the pool of those addresses is very large, and it's commonly changing. Some techniques I heard about being detecting them obvious, apart from the IP address pools and having some of these endpoints that or detectors that can investigate traffic, is just looking at latencies between the IP address and the receiving application. So there are obviously different ways, and just talking a little bit about the preventing side of things. Hopefully there are systems in place that can have rules to block unwanted traffic and only allow legitimate traffic. And those can be, based just geographic locations could be one, and an easy way of doing things, or maybe certain networks you can exclude. You can, decide whether you want to accept free email providers to your service or not, or certain email domains you don't want to have. But obviously there is always this Goldilocks principle, because we also work with customers who sometimes when they block too much, then their customer support gets a lot of calls, and then that can you could lose some legitimate business, because if you block too little, then that can have consequences as well. But hopefully there is more than and then there are some good examples of what you can do, just a basic allow deny way of doing things. And you have all seen how you can prompt the user to solve a CAPTCHA, or in particular cases they ask you to do a multi-factor authentication, have like a text message sent to your phone. But these are ways to prevent some of these abuses. And obviously want to respond to some of those when things do happen, and hopefully your system allows you to do those things. One of the challenges with a lot of the security folks, at least we have been talking to, is again the time it takes to look into these activities, and time to discover them, time to respond to them, because time is of essence when you are talking about breaches and some of these problems. And ideally you can have some of these process is automated, but sometimes you have to have some sort of manual verification. Even if the tool tells you that there is some suspicious activity, there needs to have a human eye who can hopefully can make a decision whether something needs to happen with that particular account. And there are things so you can do. You can block, suspend users, revoke accounts, and so on. But all in all, when you're putting all these things together, there are detection, prevention, responding. This is almost like a good cycle of that will hopefully reinforce this. I mean, larger organizations, and I have a link at the end of the presentation. There are separate teams that do the detections and provide it to another team that can implement it in the prevention side of the business, so that these things never stay in a static, because there are new threats emerging, there are user behaviors changing. You may have to deal with a different application in your environment, and you always have some sort of idea whether what needs to change. But at the end of the day, if you have good balance between these different efforts, then we have a good policy. Yeah, and then just to give you an idea about my world of what I'm looking at, because get a chance to look at a lot of data that is coming in, is that I was surprised a lot of these things that I didn't know, that how much automated traffic we have on the internet out there, is that, and then with the AI agents and so on emerging, that's unlikely gonna change, or versus traffic that is driven by humans. So this is very surprising to me. When we initially started out, and then we were looking at all these events coming in from our prospects and customers, we were actually surprised how much proliferation we have from IPv6 addresses, and then we thought that, oh, that was probably just a very small portion. But you may or may not know that a lot of the 5G ISPs only use IPv6, like if you are on Verizon or T-Mobile. And the third thing is it's probably coming up as more relevant these days, since Microsoft announced EOL in Windows 10 in October, but we still see traffic from Windows XP, so which is kind of surprising. And one of these things, and there are solutions there that just look at this as well, is that we see a ton of those domain names that are almost what they call lookalike domains, that can trick you, or especially in phishing emails or other activities. Or if somebody just overlooks this, is that they will take you to a different domain. That is probably not something you want. Yeah, and then just for a little bit of fun here, that do you guys know, there's just some trivias that again, looking at data and then is interesting in and itself when we look at traffic from all our customers. And the answers that we may not know some of these. I did not know. So for example, default IPv6 prefix is like a /64, which is like much larger than the whole IPv4 address space. So it's when you're looking at data or try to isolate, hey, is this traffic maybe coming from a particular subnet or not? Is it a small subnet? With IPv6, you can almost throw that out of the window because the subnet is so large that you may have to have some sort of different way of distinguishing traffic that is at a particular location versus not. Or again, we've seen this in production data too. These homoglyphs are characters that are not in the US ASCII set, but they look like they are. So the seeing this particular, and this is again just change the domain name a little bit, but it was actually something we have seen in data coming in, was just the Cyrillic alphabet's encoding of the C character was there. And to me, the last one was a big surprise too, because when you look at user agents, of course, you have Mozilla and everything in there, but when you open up your Messages app on your iPhone and look at the preview of a website, this is the user agent that the Messages app is going to send. Nothing to do with really a whole lot with the Apple ecosystem too much, but the reason why they put in some of these strings into the user agent so that fewer sites block the Messages app from displaying that content. That's the idea. So, I'm not going to go through all of these, but if in general, if you interested, I'm more than happy to share some of these the slides with you. So one of the things I mentioned was this cybersecurity framework from the NIST, which is I think it's NIST in general has great resources, so I highly recommend going over that. I was really impressed. Not everything Google does, but in this particular case, how they are, working on securing their Google Cloud infrastructure at scale. They have had a very good presentation on that, and they are the company that I mentioned that they do have separate teams that work on detection engineering versus the ones who implement those prevention rules. I'm a huge fan of Risky Biz podcast. This TLDR newsletter is amazing. Tribes on Security. From one of the companies that I do follow and I really like is Akamai. They have a very deeply detailed, technically detailed blogs about some of the attacks they are seeing and how they detected them. So they have very good analysis articles that it's worth checking out. And for this homoglyphs stuff that I didn't know what I was seeing in the logs, I definitely used this tool, which was pretty amazing to me. So I think that's really all I have, and thank you really so much for your attention. I don't know if you have any questions. Yeah.
We got a few minutes for questions. That's interesting. So yeah, we have one question in the back. Anybody wants to come off mute? Getting feedback, that's right. Ask any questions? If not, I'll start with back in the back here.
So one thing that I noticed that was conspicuously absent in your presentation was the use of honeypots. So when you were talking about credential stuffing, I have used that to great success in the past, where when I notice an attack, generate an account that they're trying to access, giving them a limited access account that you can then use to track further activities by that user or by that entity. And I've used that for great success. I mean, you can use it in other ways, but I've used that a lot in email spam tracking, where I can say, okay, if I start seeing this account being hit for other reasons or at other times, now I know that there's an attack going on and there's other stuff that I need to worry about. So I've used that honeypot aspect to great success to detecting further activities by the same entity.
Yeah, I like it a lot, and I have to admit that we also do use honeypots for our own solution, and we actually use multiple different honeypots. I can tell you from experience because I was the one setting it up. So definitely just to see what the IP addresses, what the email accounts, what kind of activities are showing up there, and then feeding that into our system to highlight potential threats or risks or certain IP addresses being part of a abuse. But yeah, I definitely agree with you 100%. And some of these, bigger vendors like Akamai or others, they have what they call sensors all over the place. The other trick that I really like as a technology, we are not using that in our. That is, I think it's a great technology. Is using these canary keys, right? So when you add some key to your system that in AWS or Azure, and then you're not using it anywhere, but if there was a breach, there was a leak inside your system, and somebody started using it, then you know that you have to look at. And I know that there are some niche companies that specialize on that. That makes sense. But yeah, it's a great comment. I'm a huge believer in honeypots. And then frankly, what I really like that some companies, I think it's in T-Mobile in Germany that has has some sort of projects around making that much easier to set up on your own, and if you wanted to.
Any other questions? Anybody online? Oh, we have another question. Hold
on. What are your thoughts on like fingerprinting and using threat identifiers provided by SSL providers such as Auth0 or even specialized tools like Fingerprint, right? Or Auth0. I'm curious, to help identify and detect any anomalous behavior.
Yeah, great question. And we also do provide ways for you to fingerprint your browser. But often when these client solutions, which may or may not be applicable to all contexts. In enterprise context, you hear sometimes about enterprise browsers like, for example, Island.io is like a known provider for these browsers that is logged down, it's specific, it tracks, it fingerprints you, and all you do as an employee is through that browser. Or you have an extension that you have to install that can track your device and so on. And that is certainly a great way to associate a user with a particular device and track them and help you to create a much more nuanced and much more sophisticated detections. But in some other contexts, when let's say you are a marketplace operator and you have users all over the world, or you are a bank and then you have to have people log in again from any kind of device, you can't tell them that you have to use my browser or you have to use my extension. Then it becomes more like a server side issue that is not as fine-grained. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at some of these browser fingerprinting libraries, but they sometimes look at over 100 different kind of attributes in the browser to generate a single unique hash string. So that it will, they take into account what kind of extensions you have installed, what kind of OS versions and libraries you have on the system, the speed of your CPU and so on. So that can be very, very fine-grained. Whether you can use that or not in every context, that's a different story. And there are some companies that do this great, but can you enforce it? Or you can have some libraries embedded in your application that will fingerprint the browser, but not we cannot unfortunately ask our customers to, hey, not change everything on your end to accommodate all this. So sometimes, or oftentimes, what we deal with is that, hey, for a particular activity, we have maybe an email address, an IP address, an account ID, and the user agents. Yeah, that's all we can go off of. And the way we are trying to, correlate these events is that we look at open source as well as paid vendors about what can you tell me about this browser? What can you tell me about this IP address? What can you tell me about this email or this domain? And there are plenty of things that can contribute to there as well. The beauty of it is that it's completely transparent to the end user. They don't have to do anything with that. With Auth0, Microsoft, Auth0, and some of these identity providers are also, getting more and more refined and fine-grained in what they can do. But what we have found is that sometimes these all-size-fits-all solutions are not necessarily great. So just to give you an example, we have customers who have legitimate traffic for certain regions, certain IP addresses, but they also have their employees moving around, and in that case they use a particular VPN provider. So can you create a rule in some of these IDPs that, hey, traffic from this region is okay, plus if they use VPN, they must use this particular VPN provider, and that's alleged traffic. If they use somebody else, or I see within a day that they're using like 5 different VPN providers, then probably that's suspicious. So again, VPN alone, that you're on a VPN is not enough. Can Auth0 tell you the name of the VPN provider? Maybe not. Or the other problem that I've seen with some of these vendors is that they provide you detection, but they tell you that, oh, we are going to be able to tell you this if this particular attack happened 1 week after we started detecting it. I'm like, 1 week? Are you seriously kidding me? I don't want to wait 1 week and have a breach or somebody wreak havoc in my systems, because that can, cost us money. So the time to detect and respond to this whole life cycle, how long it is, that can be also very critical.
All right, anything else? Anyone else? If not, let's once again, thanks Bertold here.
Thanks, Bertold. Hi.
Okay, so join us next month in September, the last Tuesday of the month. We'll have Mark Spears, I believe, is one of our presenters, and he may be at LASCON. If not, keep in mind LASCON is at the end of October, so hopefully I'll see you all there. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.